Hello, this is Anna Laura Brown, host of the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast, where we explore ideas, solutions, and helpful hints to help you in your autoimmune healing journey. We strive to transform your health and inspire hope in you so that we can help you with your emotional healing and self-care and some of your physical healing, things like diets, that kind of thing, which, you would find on any kind of podcast on autoimmune wellness. Find all the episodes with show notes at autoimmunerehab.com. And now, without any further delay, let's get started. This episode is sponsored by doTERRA Essential Oils and Wellness Products. Curious how essential oils can help you boost your immunity and help you sleep better and more? Go to annalaurabrown.com/essential-oils. Let's talk about it and request your free sample.
And I'll review.
Hello, ladies, and welcome to this episode of Autoimmune Rehab. Today's episode, I am super happy to have a guest here with me. Her name is Julianna, and Julianna, why don't you go ahead and get started and introduce yourself to us?
Hi. Well, I'm so glad to be here. I am kind of a newcomer to the autoimmune deficiency / disease / conditions community, just because I only discovered that I had one of those about 2 years ago now, a little over 2 years maybe. But my name is Julianna. I am a dietitian by trade. I work for the Veterans Association, so I see all my peeps there. And I am also a podcaster. I am not in the health autoimmune sphere for podcasting because that's where I spend most of my day job. So I have a Harry Potter podcast and a Grishaverse, which is the universe that's connected to Shadow and Bone, if you've seen that on Netflix, and two like very geeky podcasts. I also have a dog named Myrtle. My favorite color is purple, and I live on Cape Cod. So just a little dating profile for you right there.
That's funny. That's cool, though. Yeah, I'm not really that familiar with that show, but, that's cool. I am a big Harry Potter fan, though, so,
Ooh, okay. What's your Hogwarts house?
I don't know. I'm Slytherin, maybe?
Okay, so what's going to happen is I'm going to sort you by the end of this because I love sorting people because I feel like I have a good grasp on like what exactly each house the vibe is. So by the end of the episode, I'm going to sort you.
You are? Okay. That'll be cool. That'll be interesting. Yeah. That'll add an interesting twist to this. Same time, Harry Potter's so popular that I'm sure that a big chunk of people that are listening to this have probably seen and watched Harry Potter, at least, some of the movies and the books and stuff. So that's cool. Yeah. That's awesome. So you said for your day job, so do you work as a dietitian with people that have autoimmune conditions as part of your day job then, or?
Yeah. So because the VA is a very interesting setting, it's a lot different than a lot of other outpatient clinics that dietitians could work in. But essentially, because veterans have all of their health care mostly paid for under the government, they can see a dietitian for literally anything. So I see the whole gamut of people. I have people who are wanting to lose weight, gain weight. I have a lot of post-COVID people who have lost their taste, sense, and smell. A lot of diabetics, heart disease, heart conditions, autoimmune diseases. You name it, I've probably seen that person in my clinic because literally anyone can utilize my service, which is really awesome. And I really appreciate that as being part of their healthcare that they can get as veterans. But yeah, I have a few people who are kind of sticking out in my head right now, but I definitely have a lot of autoimmune people, definitely a lot of people because the Cape Cod has a much more like densely populated a much higher elderly population than a lot of other areas in the country, just because it is kind of like a retirement home almost. But I have a lot of people with like arthritis or other conditions that are related to that. But yeah, I do have a good chunk of autoimmune disease people who I work with.
That's cool. So it's probably giving you a pretty unique perspective now that, you're on this own journey. It's like, okay, now I get to be my own dietitian as well as a dietitian for other people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been interesting for me too, in a way, because now I'm more hyper aware of what things I would definitely send people who are like needing a rheumatologist or something like that, where like what those signs and symptoms are, because I've seen them in myself. And so I've actually had a lot of people who have come into, not a lot, but like at least like 10 or 12 people who have come into my clinic and they're telling me all these things. And I'm like, this feels like exactly like how I felt when I was undiagnosed, and I usually put them in for a referral to see the rheumatologist. And I can tell you what, all of them have come back and been like, that was so helpful. Thank you for sending me over there. I'm like, yeah, I know I'm not like the actual expert in all these things, but I've been through it, so I get it, and I hear what you're saying coming out of your mouth, and it sounds like my story. So maybe you should at least like see if that's the case, you know?
Yeah, for sure. So what's that like working with, like the older population, the autoimmune, you're the dietitian, so you're there to say, hey, you got to give that this food, you got to eat more of this, you got to be kind of how that's
Yeah.
going to be somewhat challenging. Although I'd imagine if they're coming to you, they're probably a little more open-minded to changing their lifestyle and their habits than if they are
Yeah.
coming to you.
Yeah, I mean, some of them definitely come because like they're like my wife made me come, or their doctor like made them come, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But I definitely do have a lot of motivated people that I'm working with because again, most of them they are making the choice to come and see me at least. But it is interesting. Just I feel like the older the person is, the more they're into like canned foods, and that's definitely a challenge when it comes to things like that. And then also, I'd say it's probably the biggest challenge working with improving like people's health when they're older with eating is their ability to cook, because there are so many people who have like, because of the autoimmune diseases a lot of the times too, or like a lot of them because of their arthritis, they like can't open a can, or they can't like cut with a knife or something because their functional ability has just been deteriorated so much that that's just kind of where they are, because their body's been attacking itself for like so many years, and maybe they didn't really take care of it that well leading up to this point. So they're kind of in a rough patch. So yeah, definitely managing their food intake and also taking into account like a lot of these people just can't cook for themselves is definitely a challenge.
Yeah, that's got to be a challenge for sure. I can definitely see that with the older people that I know. A lot of the older people that I know too, they don't,
Hmm.
cook so much for themselves. And some of them maybe never really cook for themselves. So,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I get people who literally eat out every single meal and that's just their normal. And I'm like, and they're like, my sodium is so high. I'm like, yes, I know. You didn't even have to tell me that your sodium was high. I could have guessed that.
yeah, it's crazy. It's like, well, and hopefully maybe, I mean, this obviously isn't an option for everyone, but I know that at least here in our area, there are places that will do like meal prep for people
Hmm.
that stick to like specific diets and things that, I mean, it costs about the same as eating out though. So if people are used to in their food
Yeah.
budget paying to eat out all the time, then,
Yeah.
do
So
one
a
of
lot
those
of these
meal
people,
services or something.
yeah, a lot of these times with the people who just either like to eat out a lot or can't have the ability to cook for themselves, that kind of is like the plan of attack, is more like redirecting them to where they're ordering their food from. So instead of like Papagenos or like McDonald's all the time, maybe they get their meals for Meals on Wheels or one of the other like senior meals programs that are out there. But that would depend on what's local to your area. But there are plenty of good senior meals out there. So.
For sure, absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely got a given you an interesting perspective. So now why don't you share with us a little bit about like how you figured out that you were having your autoimmunity and what's your journey's been like a little bit personally.
Yeah. So just for reference, I am 29 years old and I've been my entire life pretty much just like a creaky person. I always had just like weird back things. Like when I was a kid, my back was curved. I want to say outward, but like I would stick my stomach out. That's the way that my back was curved. So if you can just imagine that in your head, how your
Yeah.
back would have to be curved for that. And I had to do PT for that as a kid, but no one really did anything else about that. And then just periodically growing up, like I always just was in pain if I had to sit for a really long time or something like that. And people were like, oh, you're just anxious or you're just imagining it, whatever. And what happened was almost 2.5 years ago, yeah, because it was February of 2020, I believe. I was out running because I love to run, and it was way icier. I should not have been out there, but I wanted to be outside. Uh,
Yeah, that happens. Yeah.
and I went to turn around at my turnaround point for my run, and I hit the black. There was black ice out that morning, and I hit the black ice like just right. And I was walking actually around the turnaround point because I knew it was kind of slippery, so I was walking around the turnaround point, and I just hit the black ice, slipped, slammed, and slammed my knee directly onto the pavement because I am crazy and I like to wear shorts until it's 10 degrees outside. And so I had the skin of my knee like slam into the pavement, and I ran home on that because I either had to wait for like 40 minutes outside in the cold for someone to come pick me up, or I could just run the same distance home. So I was like, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to run home. And so I ran home, and I had all this pain in my knee like the following weeks, but then all of a sudden all my other joints really started hurting, and I was like, this is kind of weird. And essentially what happened is my doctor told me that I had alkalizing spondylosis. We're just going to call that AS, because that's too many words. And so he told me that, and I was like, what the heck is that? I've never even heard of this in my life. Like, what are you even talking about? Because I guess I was positive for I think it's the HLB27 gene, possibly. Don't quote me. That's probably wrong. But there's a gene that's very indicative of spondylitis AS. And I had that plus like literally every other symptom. And he was asking me, like, hey, have you ever had like back pain before? I was like, yeah, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with back pain. I don't know where it comes from. And I've just always been really creaky, and like my joints like are really painful. He's like, you have AS. And I was like, no, I don't. No, you can't make me do it. And pretty much it came to the point where I accepted that, and I started doing biological medications. I took way too many steroids, just because it was constantly like one joint offsetting another joint and the other joint offsetting another joint, and just like pain, 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 pain. And I like the steroids were not doing me any good. I mean, I don't know what the steroids do for other people, but I got this like weird skin anasarca where my skin would, yeah, it was really bizarre. Cause like I woke up one morning and like like not my muscles, my skin, and like touching clothing, and I just felt like heavier. I could feel like every motion that my body made, because I could feel my skin going like boom, boom, because it was like full of water. It was just really bizarre. So steroids were not for me in any capacity. So about like a year ago now, I decided that I was just gonna like start going, like, because I run marathons, so I work out already, but like I wasn't going to the gym and doing strength training as much as I probably should have. So I made the commitment to doing that more, and also trying out some biologicals with my rheumatologist, who, shout out to Dr. Rose Zadinsky, we'll just call him Dr. R, because he is an awesome rheumatologist, and I got really, really lucky getting him as my first rheumatologist, because I don't want to give him up. He's mine. Everyone else can walk away. But
Yeah.
but essentially, I went through one medication I can't remember the name of. I did Enbrel, and now I'm on Humira. So I guess the starting dose for AS is like every other week. Right now, I've kind of hit like a good spot where I take Flexeril, which is a muscle relaxant. I take that because my main issue is like, and everyone I've ever done physical therapy with is like, wow, your muscles are so tight. Like, you're not weak, but they're really tight. I'm like, I know. This is like, you're like the 20th person who has told me that, but what are we going to do about it? And so I actually ended up asking my doctors, because I have a friend who's used muscle relaxants who has like some similar conditions to what I have. And I was like, hey, can I like try like a low dose muscle relaxant to just see if it helps? Because I'm just so tight all the time. And because like of my own self advocacy, and that like doing the muscle relaxant, the Flexeril twice a day, and then we do the Humira once a week, and we're mostly in a good spot. So that's a good thing.
That's awesome. That's cool. Have you changed your diet then personally at all then, knowing from what you know from your dietitian experience?
Yeah, I actually have. I used to be more of like, I would call like a flexitarian. Like, I was eating some meat, but not like a lot, and was still consuming some dairy. But right now I'm just vegetarian. I don't the only like animal products that I eat really on the regular is yogurt, because I really love yogurt, and I just can't. I like it a lot. I love like all the Greek yogurts; they're so good. But other than that, yeah, I'm mostly like vegan vegetarian right now, just because I was finding that the meat was like really. I also have IBD, irritable bowel disease, and that was really bothering my stomach. Um, and so I kind of gave that up, and I definitely have felt a little bit better since that. I also am someone too who notoriously, like, I eat like mostly fruits and vegetables anyway, so like I'm really not that far from being like a regular vegan. Like, literally, it's just the yogurt. But I do eat like mostly fruits and vegetables to begin with, and like and nut products and stuff like that. So, and I think that definitely has helped me a lot, because a lot of those anti-inflammatory properties that come from all those foods So I think that if I had been eating like kind of crappy, like eating McDonald's all the time or something like that, I think I would have been, I know I would be in worse shape than I am right now. And the fact that like I was running marathons the entire time too, and like keeping up with physical activity, I think those two things like definitely helped me get to a point where I'm like still a functioning human being right now, because I have a feeling if I had just like given up and started eating ice cream all the time, I would have just ended up as a ball of pain 99% of the time instead of only like 50% of the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, for sure. I mean, what can I say? You got to have your fruits and vegetables, and yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of interesting because I talk to a lot of autoimmune people that, if anything, they kind of go the other direction with a lot of meat and not as many fruit
Oh,
and vegetables. And I don't know,
that's
personally, I
so
think
interesting.
balance in a lot of ways is better than, just completely giving up all the fruits and vegetables and eating only meat. There's like the carnivore diet thing that's circulating
Yeah.
around there. And to me, I just can't imagine doing that. I'm just like,
Yeah, to me that's so bananas. I think just knowing like the nutritional value of like I all these foods because it's my job.
yeah,
Um like to me it just seems weird that people are like, "Oh yeah, I'm just going to get all my nutrients from meat." I'm like, "But it's not you can't really do that." Like there are a lot of things
no.
that aren't like just like scientifically speaking, you cannot get all well, one, you can't get all your vitamins, minerals and nutrients met needs met from one food on the whole, like whether it be broccoli, whether it be meat, whether it be fish. Like if you only eat one kind of food, you're only going to get one set of nutrients and it's not going to be all your needs. And two, like there are so many things that are only in plants that you literally just can't get from animal foods because they're only in plants. So
Well,
like
yeah, like I mean, vitamin C comes to mind to me too. It's like, how are you gonna get
mhm,
vitamin C by just eating meat? I don't think there's really, I don't know my stuff well enough, but I'm like, I don't think there's really vitamin C in me.
no. That's so interesting too, because like all the fruits and vegetables are well notoriously known for containing high levels of antioxidants.
Yeah,
And
exactly. And your anti-inflammatories and stuff.
yeah,
So like, yeah.
that's bananas to me.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
I think it's bananas too. I literally don't
I
subscribe to
get
that
it.
philosophy, but
Yeah. I mean, it's more or less like what works for your own body, but like just scientifically speaking, like taking the person out of that whole situation, like it just makes, I don't get it. Like the science just doesn't add up. Like, yeah, I don't understand because a lot
I
of the
don't
things that
know
are
either. But
in like animal products are actually kind of like scientifically speaking, when they've studied them in labs, they're like kind of inflammatory to the other cells, especially when you
yeah.
get like saturated fats and things like that. It's they they're okay in moderation, but like to eat that is your only thing probably is not like the way to go.
That's what I have a tendency to think too. And so when I hear somebody claim that, I've seen claims on social media, people saying, "Oh, look,
Mm,
I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that, But
yeah. I mean, the issue is too is that a lot of the time the things that it's really affecting, like you might feel better in the moment. And a lot of people who start like kind of those like what I'll call fad diets, like the paleo diet or like the Atkins diet or like any of those diets. The paleo diet's my favorite though, because you're supposed to eat like a person from like the cave people times. And I'm like, do you really want to eat like someone who only lived to be 25?
yeah, I know
It's
exactly.
like
Well, and the problem I have personally too, and I actually did a whole episode with this on paleo and why I don't do paleo anymore, because I tried it temporarily, is that
mhm.
I have high cholesterol that runs in my family, and if
Yeah.
I don't have oatmeal or oats at least a couple times a week, my cholesterol skyrockets.
Oh yeah, yeah. And
So
that's the
I
thing.
can't give up oats totally, or I end up with high cholesterol. So
Yeah, well, and that's the thing people don't realize too, is a lot of the things that these diets affect, you can't see on the surface level, and you're not going to feel them or feel their effects for a while, like your cholesterol levels, like your blood pressure, your lipid levels, your sodium and potassium levels. Like you might feel a little bit off or you might feel like a little bit different, but nothing that's really going to affect you until like later down the road when all of those things have possibly gone unchecked, and then all of a sudden your cholesterol is like 400 and you're like, oh, I don't know how that happened. Oops, the daisies.
yeah, exactly. So it's like having the balance in all things. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, we want to go like our ancestors in the sense that we don't want to be having all the processed food and the junk and all the
Yeah.
high sugar and stuff. But, I mean, even then moderation's always good. And I mean, like the whole yogurt thing, even there's a lot of probiotics in yogurt, and especially if
Oh
you're eating
yeah.
yogurt that doesn't have a lot of sugar in it, that can actually be really good for you if your body
Yeah.
can tolerate the dairy. I have to kind of do the dairy free usually because my body
Mhm.
doesn't love dairy, but I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Full
not
disclosure,
really
my
bad
body doesn't
for
really
you.
like dairy either, but like me and the lactate pills are real close. We're real close buds. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, it's so interesting too. But in that regard, it is such like an individual approach. And I mean, any dietitian will tell you this too. Like everyone's body is different. And so you have to kind of learn what works for your body. And everyone's disease condition is so different too, because you and I could have the same diagnosis, but that's just one of the things that's happening in our bodies. So we have to take everything into account. And also like what your main goal is at that point in time too. If you're trying to change like your nutritional intake in regards to something, if you're like, oh, okay, like I want to reduce my inflammation, like my main thing would be like, okay, let's increase your fruits and vegetable intake and like see if there's anything that has like a lot of excess sugar or trans fat or something like that that you're eating consistently that may be causing your body to get a little bit more inflamed. Or if you're like, you know what, I want to just like dehydrate the crap out of my body and just like not care about my cholesterol, I would say, my friend, we can get you as many steaks as you like. You can do that. uh, it's just kind of thinking about like each person is different, and having a goal that's like different from someone else's doesn't make your goal any better or worse, but I think it's just more about like listening to your own body, if that makes any sense.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. It definitely does. Yeah. And I think the other thing too is I think people sometimes just will read up on different diets and then just kind of willy-nilly make up something rather than like if you don't have, especially like I did the Institute of Integrative Nutrition's online health coaching and nutrition
Hmm.
program. So, I'm definitely familiar with a lot of the diets and have some education in nutrition, but even then I still work with a nutritionist at my doctor's office, and so I tell people and you don't come from a background of knowing anything about nutrition, it's a good idea to at least see one a couple of times. Nutrition
Yeah.
health coach, somebody that can help you like with your eating rather than just going on a whim off of anything and everything that you've read and heard about when it comes to your autoimmunity, because there's probably almost just as many opinions about what different diets are good for different things as there are people. And the end of the day, the biggest thing is you got to have some kind of balance somewhere. If you
Hmm.
cut too many things out of your diet, you can end up almost in a worse shape than if you were to eat those things. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of people think because they can eat they can also be an expert on eating too, and it's kind of like thinking like, oh yeah, I can breathe, but I'm definitely not an expert on how breath works or anything like that, or like breathing patterns or breathing methods and stuff like that. It's the same thing. It's like, okay, if you can eat, that doesn't mean that you necessarily have an extensive background on all the things that are incorporated into like the breakdown of food, the nutritional composition of food, how this affects like your blood sugars, things like that. So yeah, it's nice to hear you say too, like the things are so like individualized too, because I feel like when it comes to eating and just like any autoimmune thing, what I've learned is that everyone is just like there are people who we can like kind of share the experience with in a lot of ways, but we're all just so different too when it comes to everything that we're going through.
For sure, absolutely. And there are certain things, that obviously like gluten and sugar and dairy come to mind as being like the
Hmm.
big ones, if you will, that cause problems for a lot of people. But
Yeah.
some people have issues with other things too, and so
Hmm.
it's really not something that you can just all of a sudden on a whim pick the
Just
diet you want without some kind of advice or,
like
experimentation,
customization.
keeping a customization, keeping even a journal where you go through and you keep track of what you eat and how
Hmm.
it made you feel for a little while. All that kind of stuff can be useful and
Yeah.
helpful too. So it sounds like your condition to some degree is a little bit of like a genetic condition.
Yeah.
Has anybody else in your family undergone testing now that you know that you have this problem?
I have tried diligently to get my parents to go see a rheumatologist because I am literally a copy of my dad. My sister Maria likes to call my dad's name is John. She likes to call me John Leanna because I'm literally just like a genetic copy of my dad in a lot of ways. And sometimes that's good and sometimes it's bad. But this is one of the things that I have really pushed him to go and see a rheumatologist about because I've just known him as like a creaky, like joint like stiff person my whole life, and I see a lot of the things that I'm going through in what I've seen in him as I grew up and now. And he refuses to go. My mother, I just talked to her about this last weekend because she's like, "Oh, my back hurts so much, and I'm so like my joints hurt all the time." And I'm like, "You should go see a rheumatologist." And she tells me no. And I say, "You know what? That's your life and not mine."
Yeah. And they
That's your
get through
choice.
bad enough, they'll probably do something about it until then, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It's just kind of stinks too because I think they're not really thinking like long term, because one of the joys of having AS is that you get to turn into the Hunchback of Notre Dame before you die.
Ooh, yeah.
Your spine fuses together and you start hunching forward and you turn into the
Yeah.
Hunchback of Notre Dame. So look forward to that, and from me coming soon to a theater near you in about like 60 years. But it just kind of stinks because in my head I'm like, oh, you're kind of like screwing yourself over to like my parents, because they're not putting in those preventative measures, which essentially, as you probably already know, like that's kind of what biologicals are, the
Yeah,
medications.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of put like a pause on the disease progression and help with a lot of like inflammatory factors. And because my parents don't want to get it addressed, they're kind of just like, they're just going to keep chugging down that road. And you know what? That's their choice that they made.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. So how have you changed? Like, I know you said you run marathons and stuff. Has
hmm
that changed or impacted you in any way since you got your autoimmune diagnosis, or are you still able to just chug along and keep running the marathons?
Yeah, it's kind of been a pretty like emotionally taxing learning experience, just because before this I pretty much could just like go out and do things and I didn't really have to think about it. And now it's a lot more of me just accepting things as they come to me and accepting like, hey, like maybe this training run we're going to do isn't going to be as long as we wanted it to be, just because like our knees are acting up today, and it's better to stop at like so many miles and just take it as it is than it is to push yourself to all the way that you wanted to go today. Because I definitely was that person before where I was like, if I was gonna run 18 miles today, god damn it, I was gonna run 18 miles, and you could not stop me. And that was it. But now it's more or less me trying to listen to my body a little bit more, which definitely is really challenging because I am someone who's also like very ambitious and I want to be able to do things. And for the most part, I have been able to. A lot of it has been like finding out what medications work for me, listening to my body, scaling back my training if I need to, and a lot of KT tape. We love KT tape. Um, and just being more forgiving with my body and not being like mad at it and just accepting where I am. I think is the biggest thing, is that level of acceptance. My therapist Anne always likes to tell me that I need to work on my acceptance, and I say I do, Anne. I do need to work on my acceptance because it's
Yeah.
it's hard sometimes to just to know. I feel like I'm like kind of right now, I haven't thought about it for a little bit, but I really mourned the loss of my like prior life before I fell on my knee for like at least a year and a half, where I like really like wanted that life back. I felt like I could never get back to anything. I felt like I was just like doomed to be a like broken down human forever, and there was no point in me just doing anything. And I did have some like pretty low depressive moments in all of that, but I've definitely come back on the other side, and a lot of it was because I just wasn't taking the correct medications. And now with the medications that I'm on, like I can feel like my body is like not gonna break every time I move. Because some of the things that was happening before is I was like, I would just be going about my day and I just like pull a random muscle, like without even like I'd stand up from a chair and I'd like pull my calf, and my calf would be pulled for like 4 weeks, and I'd be like, really, all I did was stand up out of a chair. And people were like, oh, you did that while you're running. I was like, no, literally, like I had one day where I was walking downstairs at work and all of a sudden my calf like blew out. I was like, this is not okay. This is not like, I'm literally just walking down a set of stairs at a very, very slow pace. Like this should not be the reality that I'm living in right now. Um, so it's been interesting. And I mean, I'll say to anyone out there who's also going through this too, like you can get through it. And grieving it, I feel like it's a natural thing to be doing, especially when it's so close to when you had your like old life or that old reality that you were living in, and now you're at a point where it's just bleak, more or less. But just know that you're not alone if you're going through that. So, and if you'd like to reach out, you definitely can. I'm sure my socials will be linked somewhere here. Happy to chat.
Yeah, they will be.
Yeah.
Any link there. So now I think that's a lot of really good information. So is there any other words of wisdom or advice that you would have for anybody that whether they're going through the same kind of thing or any other kind of an autoimmune that they're just like, oh man,
Yeah. I mean, I guess I have like 3 like little short things that come to mind. The first one would be try and find a good rheumatologist who listens to you. I think just finding someone who listens is really important. So that might mean you need to shop around a little bit and don't get discouraged. Am I allowed to swear here?
I'd rather you not, just because I'm
Okay.
trying to keep the podcast as clean. So
Okay. I will leave because I'll tell you what it is after we're done recording. But I will leave my little bit of knowledge. If you'd like my middle piece of knowledge, hit me up. I will let you know what it is in over voice message, friends who are listening, because it does contain a swear. And then my other thing is just something I like to carry with me throughout the day that I feel like makes my life a little bit better is I like to tell people it takes the same amount of energy as to be mean as it does to be nice. So why not be nice to people today? So and that also applies to yourself. And sometimes that's really hard to be nice to yourself. But I feel like that's one of the biggest favors we can do is to just kind of think like, okay, I can tear myself apart or I can build myself up. It's probably going to be about the same amount of energy. What's going to make me feel better if I just build myself up? Like, even if it's just like you walking over to the mirror and being like, hey, you're looking good today.
Yeah.
It makes a big difference. It makes a huge difference. And yeah, that's what I'll leave people with.
Awesome. Sounds good. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on and sharing. I think we've gotten some pretty good stuff. And like I said, we'll link her information on the different stuff she's up to and the Harry Potter podcast and some of the other stuff. And okay, so now, like you said at the beginning, Daniel,
I have to sort you.
Think I am.
I feel like you're a Ravenclaw.
You think so?
Yeah, you're very like detail oriented. I can tell that you're really listening to everything that I'm saying and like digesting it. I feel like you're mostly Ravenclaw, maybe like a little bit Slytherin, also like a good portion Hufflepuff, because I have a lot like the biggest trait I have with Hufflepuff is empathy, and you seem to have a good amount of empathy. But I'd say that like you're very information first. Empathy is like part of that as well, but you're very like you're driven to figure out information, and that's a very Ravenclaw thing, is to just have a goal to obtain knowledge, whatever kind of knowledge that is, and a goal to just further your own knowledge of everything around you is huge in Ravenclaw. But I feel like you're doing that out of a place of empathy. So I'm going to say you're a Ravenclaw and your secondary house is Hufflepuff.
Cool. That's awesome. Cool.
Does that feel accurate?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Yeah, especially the other stuff about me definitely is for sure. Awesome. Okay, well, thanks so much for talking with us, Julianna. And like I said, we'll have everything linked below, so people that want to get in touch with you can do that.
Hey, awesome. Well, thank you for having me. This was really nice.
Awesome.